Welcome to the show, guys. I am super excited for Fantasy Football 2022. So what I'm doing is I'm going a step above this year. I'm actually having beat writers from every team come on and discuss fantasy football impact. And not only that, team outlook of every single player and the entire team of each individual team. So today I've got a special guest here, Matt. Hopefully I'm pronouncing it right. It's our first time meeting. Matt Parrino. Is that correct?
That is right on the money.
Now, you could tell everybody a little bit more about yourself here, but I've got your portfolio here. You've done work with the UFC. You're a beat writer for the Buffalo Bills, News for Buffalo, Syracuse.com. You've got this long, amazing resume. Bottom line, it's all my fantasy people care about right now is like what are you going to tell me about the Buffalo Bills, right? Like, how's Josh Allen going to do? How's James Cook going to do? How's the committee going to do? So we'll get to that, guys. I got specific questions. It's really going to carve out his outlook probably on what they're going to do, professionally this year, but also how that may be an impact. Now, it might not be a direct impact, fantasy, but we're going to know how they're going to do from his mind. So, Matt, welcome to the show, man. I'm pumped that you're here, and can you tell us a bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is the next few weeks I feel like are really exciting because we ramp our up to training camp, and for the Bills, it's back in St. John Fisher. It's going to be around a lot of fans again. So I'm jacked up myself. Like you mentioned, I cover the Bills for Syracuse.com. We have what I like to consider the biggest Bills podcast in the market. Shout a Buffalo football podcast. You can find everything that you need to know about the Bills on that podcast all the time. We're going at least once a week all year long. We do the pregame show, like you mentioned, on Channel 4. Right. Yeah, we keep it busy all year long.
Well, I'm going to leave your podcast. Is there links? Leave your links. I'll leave them here below on YouTube. So make sure you follow them on Twitter, because this is going to give you. How often are you tweeting right now about the Buffalo Bills? Are you keeping people on everything, right? All the time?
Yeah, that's pretty much all I do all the time on my Twitter account, Bills.
Okay, so what's your @? Because there's a lot of people listening in the car. How do they find you on Twitter?
Right here. I brought it up in the app here, @Matt Parrino, underneath my face here. That's the easiest way to find it, and everything. All my content funnels through my Twitter account.
Okay, @Matt Parrino. Just Google it on Twitter. You can't miss it. You'll find it. There you go. So make sure you guys are following to stay on top of the Bills, because again, this is just overview. I just want to ask some fantasy relevant questions and some outlook. So I'm excited. I never thought I'd say this because I grew up in the Northeast. I'm excited about the Buffalo Bills. Now, as a beat writer, do you always get that thing? Because a lot of people haven't heard of this. BILLS. Boy, I love losing Super Bowls. That's something common that still comes up because you guys lost those Super Bowls in the 90s. Remember that, where you lost like 4 Super Bowls in a row? For people that don't know, because I have a younger crowd too, 18-year-olds, 22-year-olds that may not have lived through that. How does that still come up? Boy, I love losing Super Bowls.
I don't know if that particularly comes up, but like the wounds of the 90s still exist within the fan base, for sure. And actually I could probably put myself in that group. I mean, I was a hardcore Bills fan growing up. When you cover a team from the media side, it changes the dynamic of it a little bit. I'm not, rooting on Sundays for the Bills. But I think what's happened since I got back in 2018, it was 3 months. I started 3 months after the Bills drafted Josh Allen. Right. This has kind of been a steady incline to now what is the Super Bowl favorite, top MVP candidate in Josh Allen. They went out and they addressed some areas of concern on defense. And so, yeah, it's hard to find holes with this roster. So I think that there's a level of confidence within the fan base that this is going to be a big season. But to your point, there's always, that thinking back to the 90s when they went 4 straight times and couldn't win one. It's hard to do.
Now, how did you get into this? Can you tell us a little bit about your story before we get into the full outlook, impact, fantasy, and all that? Again, you worked for the UFC. What did you do for the UFC? What did you do before that? And how did you transition to the Bills to become the beat writer? It's a pretty big position here.
Yeah. So I graduated from the University of Buffalo. Horns up. Sorry. Nice. That's that team that I still get to root for a little bit. And once I was done, I got a job at a local newspaper. I was there for about 2 years. I saw this job posting for UFC.com, and it just said web producer. I didn't really know the details of the gig, but I applied. I went and did like 7 interviews. They flew me out to Vegas. I ended up getting the job, and basically they wanted to create a digital concept. Like, the NFL was so big has been so big. And what they
Right.
really did a good job of is their media package, like what they did on NFL.com, across their networks, everything like that. So they were trying to streamline on all their platforms and get the best of the best. And, I don't know if I'd call myself that, but they were trying to bring people there to kind of create a vision for UFC.com. And that's what we generated over the 4 years leading up to a complete redesign of the website. They're still doing unbelievable work there today. But the Bills job came up, and I'm from Buffalo. My wife's from Buffalo. We have a family. And so growing up in Las Vegas is not the best. I'm not knocking it. It's great, but it's hard to raise a family there by yourself. We didn't have any help out there. So we decided to move back, and I picked a good time to do it. And I've been covering the Bills ever since.
Nice. Something you're obviously very passionate about, or else you wouldn't even be doing it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I love my job. I mean, writing, talking, doing videos about football. I mean, it never feels like work. So like when I get, invitations to go on radio shows and podcasts, like I don't consider this work. So it's fun to do.
It's a great experience. And that's the same thing with me with fantasy football. It's just like, it doesn't feel like work. Sometimes it does, because I got to get a podcast out. I got to do X, Y, Z and cross it off my day. But yeah, it's something that just flows naturally for me too. I totally get the feeling. All right, so let's talk outlook. Let's talk about the draft, who you guys kind of picked up here. I've got a list. Again, you probably know I'm not very good with defensive players, so I'm not going to get into it too much. Maybe you could dive a little bit more. You went Elm with corner. You went with the cornerback round 1, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they drafted Kyer Elam out of
there you go. I didn't even pronounce
Florida.
It right.
Yeah, he's super speedy wide receiver, some good press skills, ability to cover. And this is a significant upgrade over Levi Wallace, who he was an undrafted guy out of Alabama for the last 4 years. He just kept winning the job. And they finally, spent a day one asset on a cornerback. It's the first time they've done that since they drafted Tre'Davious White in 2017. So they're hoping that that's going to be, that tandem of the future once Tre'Davious White gets back from the ACL injury. And obviously they added Von Miller up front. And so pairing those two things together, getting like a premier pass rusher and potentially a really good, at least above average CB2, that defense was already really good. And I think that the idea is to take it to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't really have to address anything on the O-line, did they? Are you guys totally comfortable with your O-line? I think you got a guy in like round 7. You got an O-line guy, or round 8.
Yeah, Luke Tenuta. Yeah, Luke Tenuta. They love. He's from Virginia Tech. He's like 6'8", 320. That is the brand that they've kind of gone after over the last 2 years. They drafted Spencer Brown, who started a bunch of games for them last year, 6'8", 315. They drafted Tommy Doyle last year out of Miami, Ohio. Same thing, 6'8", 3 something. So they want big, tall, athletic offensive linemen. And they lost John Feliciano, who went to the Giants. They lost Darrell Williams. They needed to create some cap space. They brought in Roger Saffold, who went to the Pro Bowl last year, has been blocking for Derrick Henry the last couple of years. And they brought back Brian Bates, who was a really popular guy. He got a few interested parties. The Bears ended up offering him a restricted free agent contract. The Bills ended up matching it. And so they're paying him $4 million a year, which everybody kind of projects him to be the starter over there at right guard. So they don't have a lot of holes, to your point, and they're returning most of their starters on both sides of the ball.
All right, let's talk a little bit about, I'm getting right to it because I'm a fantasy hat. I got to dive right to it. Now, first of all, are you allowed to play fantasy? Do you play fantasy? Is it a conflict of interest or anything like that? Because you have all this inside. Can you?
I play fantasy, but I don't play it. I don't play it for like big. I do like a family league, and I think we do like a work league. Like, yeah, it's not big money stakes or anything like that.
Okay, good. That's what I figure. A lot of people that are in the industry, like, they don't really play for money stakes just because, again, they've got their hands in there, but I don't want to get too much into that. I got to talk about this backfield, okay? Because, again, I'm kind of like one of those guys that calls it straight how it is. And, again, I don't want to offend your players or your team, but I got this saying, right? It's called years to wow me, and I'm not wowed, okay? Singletary, like, yeah, 100. I look at his stats right now, 188 attempts, 4.6 yards per carry. He's not your Derrick Henry or Najee Harris, right? Then he brought in Zach Moss, Moss Boss and all this stuff. People got a little excited. I'm like, yeah, what did he do? 3.6 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns. Now you bring in Cook, right? James Cook. And I'm like, second round pick. From what I hear, I'm not in as you are, but again, tell me if I'm completely wrong here, but this is the sense I get because I'm very intuitive with fantasy. And if I'm totally wrong, tell me, Joe, you're totally wrong. I see, and again, I'm going to lay out what I think. I think it's going to be a bit of a committee. I think maybe James takes the starting job, but I think he's going to be integrated more into the passing game a little bit, maybe lining up outside a little bit. I think, again, this is my opinion. This is the feeling I'm getting. I think if I draft Cook, I think he'll be good. I just don't think he's going to be that workhorse back because I still think they're going to be running that committee. And with Allen running the ball, he gets his fair share of rushing attempts. Gabriel Davis stepping up last year in the postseason. I don't see the volume for James Cook to be, let's say, a top 10 fantasy running back. Again, that's my prediction. How do you feel? Is James Cook going to run with it? Is he going to be the next Dalvin Cook? Like, I just want to get your feedback, please.
So I think that there's tons of potential for James Cook in the NFL. I want to start there. But to your point, there's a few things working against him. Number one, historically with the Bills, now Brian Daboll was the offensive coordinator the last 4 years. He's moved on to the Giants. Ken Dorsey is now the offensive coordinator, and they brought in Aaron Kromer, who historically has been really good at developing run games. I mean, you go back to New Orleans, you go back to the Rams, even with LaShawn McCoy with the Bills during his first stint, he's done a really good job of getting his offensive line to be above average to really good run blockers. So, but here's the problem. No matter what they do to change, the philosophy or to be better in the run game, you still have Josh Allen, who is going to be thrown at 30 to 35 times a game. He runs the ball quite a bit. Patrick Mahomes just said the other day he's picking Josh Allen to win MVP because of how many, rushing yards and touchdowns he ends up racking up. They want to run Josh Allen less. They want to keep him healthy. He's now 25. I think this regime is from Carolina, where they went through the Cam Newton experience, and they don't want to beat up Josh Allen's body. So if they can kind of take some of the requirement off of him in the run game and spread it around, the problem is, and we'll see how philosophically it changes. Brian Daboll is from the school of Bill Belichick, Dante Scarnecchia out in New England. What's the fantasy Bible in New England? Never trust a Patriots running back because they just spread it around. And that's the same kind of thing that's happened in Buffalo. Now, here's the thing with Cook. Kromer spent a lot of time in New Orleans, right? He was there for plenty of years. He worked with Pete Carmichael, who's been the offensive coordinator there forever under Sean Payton, so on and so forth. What was the dynamic duo there? Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara. In my opinion, and I don't know if he has the same ceiling. I don't think he does, but even if he's a poor man's version of Alvin Kamara, that's who I think James Cook is going to be in this scenario. The pass catching ability. The first thing Brandon Beane said when they drafted him is, we think that he can win in the passing game everywhere. Deep threats, short, intermediate. They're going to line him up everywhere in the formation. I think that that's where, if you're playing in a PPR league, Cook is really worth a late round flyer this year. And I think he's higher end dynasty value because of the potential PPR potential that he'll bring. And Singletary, he's going into a contract year. And you're right, it's been kind of up and down. The last 10 games of the season, he was really good. I think he had the third most touchdowns in the NFL in the last from whatever it was, November 25th on to the rest of the season. He's got to continue that. But the problem is, they're probably not going to pay him next year. And they have Zach Moss still on that rookie deal, who's kind of sitting there. And if he shows enough this year, they can almost let Singletary walk and hand that role, the Mark Ingram role, to Zach Moss in year 4. So I don't know. We'll see. There's a lot of different things that have to play out. But to your original point, I just think in an offense with Josh Allen, it's really, really tough to count on a running back.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. I mean, 4th in attempts last year amongst quarterbacks, Josh Allen. And arguably one of, if not the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Now, I'm a visionary. I'm a very intuitive person. I remember the debate I had. I remember posting something on my Instagram. I said that Allen's better than Baker Mayfield, and people lost it on me. This is when everybody was drafting Mayfield ahead of Allen, and I was getting Josh Allen round 10. I guess when he started, I went to one training camp in Buffalo. I think it was his rookie year or second year. He was having some inconsistency issues with passing. Is that true? He kind of started off like that, and then he found that groove. Right now, he's primed.
Yeah. I think that he was at a bit of a deficit coming from a really low level D1 school, and just the kind of tools available to him there. So when he got to the NFL and started working with, Brian Daboll, who had been in so many different offenses, had just come from winning a national title at Alabama. And then Ken Dorsey, they add in year 2, and the work that he's done with him over the last 3 years has been unbelievable. But really, Where Josh Allen has really blossomed the most is in his offseason work with Jordan Palmer, who's that quarterback guru out in California. And they've literally just reconstructed his fundamentals. I mean, he's done digital mapping to see his arm angles and where his hips are at his throws. They've brought in different guys to talk to him, like Tony Romo, Peyton Manning, Brett Favre. I mean, he's spent, probably more time out of the Bills facility working on his fundamentals than he has there, just because of how much work he's done to create what you know of Josh Allen today. But you're right. Early on, he didn't have a lot of talent around him. Like, that's part of it too. That offensive line was putrid. The skill position guys were really bad. Brandon Beane had to get to work and add players around him. John Brown early on, Cole Beasley early on. Those were really important in his development, just giving him tools. And then obviously we know what Stefon Diggs did. It took his game to the next level.
All right, so Alan, do you think he's hit his seat? Like, he's the number one quarterback, pretty much, give or take. It's between him, Mahomes, Herbert's in the mix there. Does Josh Allen have more of a ceiling based on, like, what do you have? 36 touchdowns, something like that, 15 interceptions last year. Let me just double check that. Is there more ceiling? Yeah, 36-15. Is there more ceiling to, like, is he going to have a 50 touchdown season like Mahomes did years ago? Is there more ceiling, or has he kind of capped his ability, or is there more to have here with Allen?
There's one thing that I've been really hearing over the last couple of weeks here at OTAs that's perked my interest in about maybe him having a little bit higher of a ceiling potential. Ken Dorsey loves to attack. That's what we heard last week. Gabriel Davis said, in that game last year, Dorsey was on the sideline saying, keep going at their throats, keep going, keep attacking, keep throwing. And if you have a play caller that's willing to take those kind of shots and knowing what he has in Josh Allen, yeah, I think there's a lot of potential there. There's a lot of talent in the wide receiver position. They went and drafted Khalil Shakir, who a lot of draft experts had out of Boise State as a 3rd round talent. They got him in the 5th round. He can do a little bit of everything. He's kind of like a gadget guy, like a smaller version, poor man's version of Deebo Samuel a little bit. They can line him up in the backfield, move him around the formation. So he's somebody that I'm really excited to watch. And I thought Isaiah McKenzie, you go back to his game against the Patriots last year where he had 11 for 125 and a touchdown. If they give him a bigger role, I'd really like to see what he does with it as well. They went out and signed Jamison Crowder, who I think is just as good as Cole Beasley in the slot when he's healthy. So we'll see. They still have all the weapons with Diggs, Gabriel Davis, and Dawson Knox there as well at tight end.
Like, Davis looked phenomenal in the postseason, right? The playoffs. Okay. Hadn't really done anything wild and sensational throughout the season. Then he really sparked. Now, do you think this is a big question a lot of people ask, a lot of people on people's minds. And again, I like the upside, but he's got Diggs as the one there who had 165 targets. He's going to be the guy. But how much is Davis going to get integrated this year? Because his ADP shot up now. A lot of people draft him relatively high, thinking he's going to perform on a high level. Is that postseason performance going to continue the offseason? Is that going to take away from Diggs? Should I be concerned if I'm drafting Diggs round 1, round 2, or how is this going to play out? Now you've got Crowder there, Sanders. It's a slew of wide receivers. Is Davis going to really thrive, you think?
I'm buying all the Gabriel Davis stock I can get in dynasty and basic leagues. So look at this. Look at these numbers. 7 touchdowns as a rookie, 6 touchdowns in his second year. He was playing behind Brown in year 1. He couldn't get on the field. When they ran packages for him, all the guy did was catch touchdown passes. Same thing last year. They really were forcing Emmanuel Sanders at 34 years old because of his pedigree, what he's done in the league, his Super Bowl experience. So he was getting all the looks early in the season. I mean, Gabriel Davis wasn't getting regular snaps until like week 14 when Emmanuel Sanders got hurt. So then you saw what happened in the final stretch of the season. Most of that production came when he was finally given that chance with Sanders kind of banged up. And then in the playoffs, they couldn't keep him on the bench anymore. They unleashed him against the Chiefs. And so I think he is number 1 in pen, wide receiver 2 on this team. And because of the attention that Diggs gets, I just think Gabriel Davis has the opportunity to just absolutely eat. It reminds me a lot of Mike Williams in the Chargers offense because of the attention teams have to pay to Keenan Allen. Guys, he's not as dynamic, Gabriel Davis, right? He's not as big, he's not as fast, he's probably not as strong, but man, he's not far off. He does everything so well, fundamentally well. He's just a workaholic in the offseason. I really like Gabriel Davis, and Josh Allen has tons of confidence in him. You saw it play after play. In that Kansas City game, he just kept going back to him.
Yeah, I'm looking at the numbers. It actually makes sense mathematically that he does have a good year. Cole Beasley, 112 targets last year. He's gone. Sanders, 72 targets. That's probably going to go down. Like you said, I think they're going to shift. I think they're going to shift over to Davis. So 72 targets. That's going to move over his way. And maybe Diggs loses some targets and Davis becomes a solid, neck to neck with Diggs. And so I'm looking at the numbers mathematically. Like we said, Josh Allen was 4th in attempts last year. So sky's really the limit for a guy like Gabriel Davis if he continues with that momentum in the postseason. Wow.
Yeah, and two, like, he's just got this chip on his shoulder. He was probably in his most wide receiver years, he probably goes 2nd round. He ended up going in the 4th to the Bills because he was in that draft with all those absolute studs. That was the 2020 class of just unbelievable wide receiver talent. So,
Right.
I think he's somebody that you're probably going to get wherever you draft him in a dynasty or, well, not in a dynasty, but if you're starting a dynasty league this year or in a regular league, you're going to get really great value on him because I think people are just sleeping on his situation a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's just recap this. I want to talk about tight end real quick. Allen, solid, right? I don't know if I'm going to pay him because I'm used to getting him in the 10th round when everyone was sleeping on. So I'm going to probably fade Allen. I love him. I actually did a money league, got Herbert 5th round. So I'm like, okay, I'll take that. Allen came off, I think 3rd. So I'm like, okay, I'll take the Herbert in 5th round. Committee. So is this going to be, we're not going to hold you to it. In your best opinion, is this going to be a committee or is it going to be a James Cook eventually take over, get the volume, going to be a guy like Dalvin Cook, or is it always going to be a committee? Take the Josh Allen factor out from the three-headed monster perspective. How do you see distribution here? Is it going to be like 60, 40, 20, or like, what would your best guess be?
I'd probably say to start like 65 Singletary, 25 Cook, like in terms of running reps, and then maybe like 10 to 15, whatever that ends up being the math for Zach Moss. I think Moss is going to get an opportunity. I think they could go game plan specific, and when they want to like kind of bang, be a little bit more physical, Zach Moss traditionally has been the guy they like to use in those games. 2 years ago in his rookie year, I mean, he had a 2 or 3 touchdown game against the Patriots where he was just explosive. We haven't seen that enough though from him. So I'm not counting him out. I think it'll come down to, the scheme change a little bit, going from Bobby Johnson where, they did a lot of gap schemes, and they're going to kind of go more to like a zone scheme in this system with Ken Dorsey now having Aaron Cromer, who's had a lot of success with that over the course of his career. So I think it comes down to personnel, who runs the best. I know people are trying to get in that James Cook train. I just don't think he's going to get the carries to warrant it, especially in year 1.
Right.
Just because I don't think any back since Sean McDermott's taken over. I mean, even go back to 2017 with LaShawn McCoy, his numbers weren't like great. I mean, from a fantasy perspective, that was kind of like the dip when the dip started.
Right.
So I don't know. I just don't trust any running backs. It's probably going to be a committee, and it's probably not going to be one that you like, depending on which one you end up with.
Okay. And wide receiver, we're both in agreement that Davis could be good value and high ceiling kind of guy, right?
Oh yeah. My sleeper pick for the receiver group, like I mentioned, I'd take a flyer on McKenzie. I know they like Crowder and he could kind of slot into that Cole Beasley role, but I think McKenzie has some big time potential, and Crowder's had some trouble staying healthy over the last couple of years. Just his size, he gets beat up a little bit. Same thing happened with Cole Beasley in this offense. So if McKenzie gets like a stretch of time in this offense, I think he could be explosive as well.
So there you have deep sleeper Isaiah McKenzie there. And let's talk about Dawson Knox. A lot of hype around him this year, for the fantasy heads anyway. Like, I like Dawson Knox, decent value in drafts. What do you think of Dawson Knox? I mean, he's very touchdown dependent. Looking at last year, 49 receptions, 71 targets. Are some of those targets going to move away to Davis now, being a red zone kind of guy, or is Dawson Knox still going to thrive?
I think some of the targets could move to OJ Howard, who the Bills brought in from
Right.
Tampa Bay. They didn't run a lot of 2 tight ends last year, like out in the formation. They would do some stuff with some jumbo stuff with Dawson in there, and they bring on an extra offensive lineman. But I think, Howard could get some run here. They really like his athleticism. I wouldn't be surprised if Brandon Beane maybe had a draft crush on him a couple years ago, and to be able to bring him in on this 1-year deal to kind of see what it looks like. He could be somebody. Honestly, I think that might hurt Dawson Knox value in fantasy a little bit, knowing that Howard's there, and maybe that could take a little bit away from his target share. But he has, if you can get him in the right value, and I'd say maybe like that 7 to 10 tight end off the board, and he's
Right.
probably going to go sooner than that. I haven't looked at actual drafts, mock drafts yet, but I think he can be a really valuable because of his relationship with Josh Allen. They worked out together in the offseason. He looks for him. He's a red zone threat, and this is a big year. It's a contract year for him, and so I like Knox too. I'd be a little bit wary of the situation and some of the other guys in that huddle.
That's really good intel. I didn't even think of Howard. Like I kind of thought of it. I saw him sitting there. I'm just like, because I'm kind of fading Knox, so I didn't really put too much thought into it. But I definitely see him what I call being a fantasy football pest. It's a new term I created. So when you've got like your workhorse person, you got the backup in the committee. Like Kareem Hunt is Nick Chubb's pest, for example, right? So in this case, everyone drafting James Cook is going to be annoyed if Singletary still continues to get volume. We're very cutthroat, us fantasy guys. You know how it is. It's just like we want our guys to get the volume, right? We don't want any pests in there. So that's really good. To wrap this up here, two more things here. Is there any inside information? Well, not inside information, but information that you may know, a piece of a golden nugget or something that you may know as of late, breaking news that may sway how we're doing for fantasy type thing? Is there anything you could tell us that would help fantasy or even reality on the outlook? Any type of golden nugget, anything that we don't know that's not really kind of mainstream or?
Not really. It's been kind of ho-hum, to be honest with you. I mean, they went out and, like we talked about over the course of the show, added all these different pieces to what was already like an extremely strong roster. The one thing I will say is if they do like, whatever the mix is now with Aaron Kromer and Joe Brady is Josh Allen's quarterbacks coach now. So that's a kind of like an interesting thing that might have flown under the radar for people. How is that going to change things? Not only for Allen, but this offense. I mean, he had all that success as a receivers coach at LSU, was an offensive coordinator, didn't go well with the Carolina Panthers, but a young, talented coach that how are these three guys collaborating, being Dorsey, Brady, and Kromer to kind of invent a new look to this offense? Because I think that's the trend that we now have to follow every year is how are these teams going to reinvent their offense? We saw the Chiefs struggle out of the gates last year and have to kind of change things a little bit to be more effective. The Bills kind of had to do it to a degree as well. They found a lot of success with Reggie Gilliam, who's their fullback tight end hybrid type of guy that, really puts defenses in a bind because of his ability to catch the ball, but at the same time is a really good blocker. So I don't have any like great nuggets of information, but we'll have you covered on the podcast. Like, follow it throughout all of training camp, any developing story. If you got a lot of Bills on your roster, that's the place you're going to get the latest and greatest news.
Okay. What's the name of your podcast so people can go to Spotify and find, are you on Spotify everywhere?
Yep, we're on everywhere. Apple, Spotify, Stitcher. It's Shout a Buffalo Football Podcast. Obviously, you can search my name, Matt Parrino, my co-host, Ryan Talbot. We got you covered.
Okay, sounds good. Last question here. Outlook for Super Bowl bound. Like, do you guys have no one can really predict this 100%. Any missing pieces that you feel that were lacking that didn't get you a Super Bowl last year? Do you think those voids have been filled, and do you have what it takes? Obviously, try not to be biased. Is there anything that could be hindering you from beating like a Pat Mahomes this year or someone like that? Do you think you guys are complete now? Everything, all the pieces are in place to have a full run. You could win it this year.
Well, you came to the right place for unbiased because it's literally my job. I can't be biased. No, so I think what happened in the Kansas City game last year is sure the coverage broke down for sure. They weren't good in coverage. Tyreek Hill had himself a day. Travis Kelce in the overtime making that, or in the last 13 seconds making that big play. They also didn't have oh man, that was cool to be in the building for that one. That was a fun one to cover. But they didn't have enough pass rush. Like Jerry Hughes has been so good over the course of his Bills career, 4th all-time franchise history in sacks. But they weren't getting it done at the end there. And so what the Bills did is, of course, they brought in Von Miller. They have the 3 young pass rushers, Greg Rousseau, Boogie Basham, and AJ Epinesa. They spent big time on the interior. They brought in Daquan Jones, Tim Settle. They brought back Jordan Phillips, who had 9.5 sacks for them 3 years ago before he got paid in Arizona. It didn't go well there for him, but this is where he's had the most success of his NFL career. So they just got a ton of numbers on their defensive line. They're going to rotate them. They're going to keep guys fresh. I think the most under talked about storyline with this Bills is the potential for how good this defensive line I think could be in 2022. Which, listen, if they're talking about Super Bowl odds and winning in the playoffs, you just have to look at what the Rams did last year, right? Matthew Stafford was fine for most of the Super Bowl. It was that defense and what they did to that Cincinnati offense that I think really, showed out and showed up. So the Bills defense has to kind of try to emulate that. Another thing to monitor, Jordan Poyer is kind of holding out right now. He wants a new contract. He was an all pro last year at that strong safety or free safety position or strong safety position. So that's going to be something interesting. He's a very important piece of their defense. And, I know players typically now they hold in rather than hold out. So he'll probably show up for training camp. But if he's unhappy, that's a missing link that they got to figure that out before the season starts.
Very nice. Well, I appreciate it. You answered a lot of questions here, a lot of fantasy help for sure, a lot of good insight. I appreciate you, Matt Parrino. Thank you for being on the show. It means a lot. Guys, go find him at Matt Parrino on Twitter and listen to the podcast. So if I just Google, if I go to Spotify and I just put your name in, it should bring up your podcast, I'm guessing, right?
That's a great question. I think it probably will.
We'll figure it out right now. You guys go.
Yes, it does. It comes up first thing.
Yeah, that's all you got to do. Just type that in. I see it. Shout, a football podcast on the Buffalo Bills. I'm excited. I'm going to listen to it myself because I got to stay up to beat. Now, do you guys cover fantasy on the show at all? Is there any talk about it or not really?
We do like specials mostly, but it's mostly like beat coverage. So day-to-day coverage of the team.
All right. Interesting. So if you want that inside information, go check it out. Matt, thanks for being on, guys. I appreciate it. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel, giving you guys that competitive edge. All right, guys, thanks for being here, and we're out. Thanks, Matt.